Now, before we get too far into anatomy, I want to talk about what unites us with all living things on the planet. And those are the characteristics that make something alive. So the first thing is order or organization, a complex structure and order. And we see this in every living thing, even things that are only a single cell. We're going to talk about the structures and order of single cells. Metabolism, or to put it another way, every living thing eats and poops. Yes, even plants, they eat sunlight and CO2 and poop oxygen. Thank you, plants. Growth and development. All living things increase in size from taking in materials from their environment. All living things respond to changes in their environment. And it may be something very simple, such as moving toward or away from the light, or it could be very, very complex things like figuring out how to build a computer. Regulation. All living things maintain a consistent internal environment that is different from the environment outside. And this is going to be, again, something that every single cell in your body does. The environment inside every cell is going to be a little different than even the fluid surrounding those cells. And we're going to talk a lot about the ways that cells maintain that different structure and move things in and out of that internal environment. Homeostasis is the word we use for the process of maintaining that separate internal environment. Reproduction. All living things produce new cells for growth and are able to reproduce themselves. So all living things can make a copy of themselves. Now, all of these characteristics of life are done by all individuals, except, of course, reproduction. Not all individuals actually end up reproducing. But an organism can reproduce or is produced by reproduction. That's how you get something like a mule, where we crossed a horse and a donkey. We get an organism that is actually sterile, but it was produced by reproduction. Now, adaptation or evolution is the other characteristic of life, but it happens not to individuals, it happens to a population as a whole, or a species as a whole. What we mean that this doesn't happen at the organismal level is that each organism is born with a certain set of genes, and they're going to die with those same genes, except in some very rare circumstances. At the population level, on the other hand, the gene pool of a species changes from one generation to the next, and that's what we mean by adaptation. So we start with this idea that each generation is different from the one before. And that's because each generation, contains individuals whose ancestors were better at survival and reproduction than other individuals. Those individuals who reproduced more made sure that the next gene pool for the next generation had more copies of their genetics than somebody else's. Over many generations, this leads to organisms that are well adapted to the environment they live in because the gene pool contains genes from individuals who were able to survive and reproduce and pass on their genes. That is what adaptation or evolution is. Now, in order to be alive, something has to have all of these characteristics. If you're missing one, congratulations, you may be close to alive, but you're not alive. And that's why viruses are not considered alive. Viruses actually do adapt and evolve. That's one reason that there's always new viruses showing up, because they do evolve. However, viruses cannot reproduce themselves. They invade a cell. A virus is also not a cell. A virus invades a cell and gets the cell to make new viruses. So they don't reproduce. They don't maintain an internal environment. They do respond to the environment, but they don't grow and they don't have a metabolism. So because they don't have all of these characteristics, viruses aren't considered alive. Now, I do want to show you one more thing, and that is just the tree of all living things on Earth, showing the evolution from the first living thing that was similar to modern day bacteria about 4 billion years ago. And you can see that life has adapted in many, many different ways to many, many different environments and lifestyles. And humans, although we think of ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, we are in fact this tiny little branch down here, just one little branch on this huge tree. So, I know you're very special, but humans are not that special.